Welcome back to The Explainer. I am so incredibly excited to jump into today's topic with you. We're going to be looking at a completely everyday observation that is actually masking this huge, fascinating mathematical mystery of human survival and evolution. I mean, if you look around, or honestly, even just look at your own hand right now, you'll see we all write, we eat, and we throw differently. But why? Why does this difference even exist in the first place? So let's just dive right into this. If you know anyone a little older who is left-handed, there's a pretty good chance they were actually forced to learn to write or eat with their right hand. In a lot of places around the world, it's still super common to force kids to use their quote-unquote proper hand. It goes so deep into human history that the word for right literally translates to correct or good. And that's not just an English thing. You see it in a ton of different languages. So if society has historically treated being lefty as something that's somehow, wrong, why does it keep happening?
Think about this. Today, only about 1/10 of the world's population is left-handed. The other 90% are right-handed. And this sets up our core evolutionary mystery for today. Why does this tiny minority exist at all? If it's been historically stigmatized and punished, why hasn't it just vanished completely over the years? And here's the crazy part. This isn't just some modern fluke. Archaeological evidence shows that this exact 10% split has basically persisted for 500,000 years. 500,000! We know this because about 10% of ancient human remains show specific differences in arm length and bone density that prove they were left-handed. On top of that, we found ancient tools and artifacts showing clear evidence of left-hand use. So it's been literally locked in at this ratio for millennia. All right, part 1. Genetics and the dice roll. Despite what a lot of people might think, handedness is absolutely not a learned choice. It can actually be predicted before you're even born, just based on how a fetus is positioned in the womb. But does that mean it's purely genetic? Well, yes and no. Take identical twins. They share the exact same genes, right? But they can actually end up having completely different dominant hands. In fact, that happens just as often with identical twins as it does with any other pair of siblings. But check out how the math works out, because this is where it gets really interesting. Your chances of being right or left-handed are determined by your parents in surprisingly consistent ratios. If your dad is a lefty but your mom is right-handed, you've got a 17% chance of being born left-handed. But if both your parents are right-handed, they'll only have a left-handed child 10% of the time. Handedness really seems to be a roll of the dice. But, and this is the crucial point, those odds are completely rigged by your genes. So that brings us to the ultimate question. If the odds are set by our genetics, it implies there's a real, tangible reason evolution produced this specific, small proportion of lefties and held on to it for thousands of years. Natural selection is incredibly efficient. It doesn't really waste time. So there has to be a mathematical reason this trait hasn't just grown to dominate the whole population or, completely dropped to zero. Which leads us to part 2, the competitive advantage. To crack this case, researchers built a mathematical model, looking at human history as an evolutionary tug of war. And the first half of that war is competition, 50%. In professional baseball, a mind-blowing 50% of top hitters have been left-handed. That is massively disproportionate to the mere 10% of lefties running around in the general population. So what's going on here? It really all boils down to the surprise advantage, because lefties are a minority. Both right-handed and left-handed competitors naturally spend most of their time training against righties. So when it's time to actually face off, the left-hander is totally prepared for a right-handed opponent. With the righty, just picture a confused right-handed gladiator suddenly dealing with a sword swinging at them from the completely wrong direction. They're going to be so thrown off guard. Being a rare lefty basically gives you this undeniable edge in combat and head-to-head sports. And there's actually a specific scientific term for this fighting hypothesis. It's called negative frequency dependent selection. Basically, it's an evolutionary principle where an imbalance in the population actually creates a huge advantage for whoever has the rare trait. So back in our evolutionary past, having that rare trait meant you were a pretty deadly left-handed fighter or hunter. Now, according to the strict rules of evolution, groups with an advantage survive. They reproduce and their numbers grow until that advantage isn't rare anymore. If human history was just one giant, endless fighting arena, natural selection would mean lefties would survive and multiply until there were so many of them that being left-handed wasn't a surprise at all. So if we lived in a purely competitive world, we'd definitely expect to see a perfect 50-50 split in the population. But obviously we don't.
Which brings us to part 3, the cooperative penalty. Because, as we know, humanity didn't just fight its way through history. Our evolution was shaped just as much by cooperation as it was by competition. And this cooperative pressure pushes things in the exact opposite direction. Let's contrast that massive baseball stat with this one, 4%. In golf, a sport where your success relies on you and your tools, with no live opponent trying to actively stop you, only 4% of top players are lefties. Golf is honestly a perfect example of what researchers call the tool-sharing penalty. Because we're such a cooperative species, almost all the important tools that shaped human society were designed for the right-handed majority. I mean, think about it. It's way harder for a kid to find a set of left-handed golf clubs, just like it's harder for a left-handed person to use standard scissors or power tools or heavy machinery. Because lefties have to navigate a world built for right-handers, they historically struggle more with these shared tools and actually suffer from notably higher accident rates. So play that out over thousands of years. In a totally cooperative utopia filled with shared right-handed tools, left-handers would be at a huge disadvantage. Taking on higher accident rates and daily inefficiencies every single day would mean they'd eventually just phase out of the population entirely. In a purely cooperative world, we'd be looking at exactly 0% lefties. And this is where it all finally comes together. Part 4, evolution's perfect balance. So we've got these two massive, completely opposite forces at work here, and a recent mathematical model finally layered these theories together to solve this half-million-year-old mystery. Behind the scenes of our biology, competitive pressures are pushing the left-handed population to grow because of that fighting advantage. But at the exact same time, cooperative pressures are pushing the left-handed population to shrink because of the tool-sharing penalty. These two forces are constantly pushing against each other, acting as this unending evolutionary tug-of-war. And when researchers actually map out this tug-of-war mathematically, it perfectly predicts an equilibrium point. Guess where that exact balance point lands? Exactly 10%. This math flawlessly predicts the distribution of left-handed people we see in the general population, and it lines up perfectly with data from sports and historical records. The persistence of lefties isn't some biological glitch. They are a small, super stable minority because 10% is literally the exact mathematical balance point between competition and cooperation in human history. And this math is amazing because it actually gives us clues into other groups too. For instance, scientists notice a highly skewed distribution of podness in cooperative animals. Honestly, your dog might actually be a lefty. And on the flip side, when anthropologists study highly competitive human hunter-gatherer societies, they find a slightly larger percentage of lefties than our standard 10%. The environment dictates the exact balance. It is just wild to think that something as simple as the hand you write with is basically a half-million-year-old biological fossil record of how our ancestors fought and cooperated to survive. It really leaves us with a fascinating question to chew on. What other puzzles of early human evolution are already right here, literally hiding in our hands? Thank you so much for hanging out with me on The Explainer today. Keep learning, keep questioning things, and keep looking for the hidden structures in our world.